This month, heroes and heartbreak in Auckland.
We're leading and then they were leading and then we were leading and then they were leading and then we were leading.
Crash and burn in the Caribbean.
If my sandwich gets wet, I'm gonna cry.
Plus, foiling for all. But first, how one team rushed home for tea. In the 19th century, tea time was a great excuse for a race. Rushing back from China to London with the new season's crop of tea in their holds, the Great Tea Race of 1866 was on. Completing the 14,000-mile trip in 99 days, Ariel won. But Taiping was just 28 minutes behind. Today, there are faster ways of getting tea to London. But the record by sea still attracts challengers. In 2008, Lionel Lemonchois aboard the 100-foot catamaran Gitana 13 took just under 42 days. This year, Italian offshore sailor Giovanni Soldini and his crew aim to beat this time in a smaller boat, Maserati, a Mod 70 trimaran. This is no easy record to beat. With complex weather systems to negotiate, the route is tactically challenging. And while the trimaran is notoriously quick, its performance comes with some risks. Soldini's 5-man crew left Hong Kong on January the 18th.
Primo giorno di navigazione a canna morta, si potrebbe dire. Ottime condizioni, felicissimi di essere in mare.
5 days later, as they passed Jakarta, Indonesia, they'd pulled more than 500 miles ahead of Gitana's record pace. It was early days, but as they headed out into the Indian Ocean, their challenge was off to a good start.
Vamos, por fin, ese Índico que nos espera. Es la punta de Jakarta.
Out in the open ocean, their passage was fast, as Maserati recorded average speeds of 30 knots with peaks of 40. Then, on day 10, drama.
Purtroppo oggi abbiamo avuto un incidente, c'è stato un grande urto in mare, abbiamo sentito un rumoraccio brutto, siamo saltati fuori subito a controllare, abbiamo perso il timone di destra, sicuramente appunto abbiamo urtato qualche oggetto galleggiante, qualcosa che c'era in acqua, ma abbiamo pensato di portarci un timone di scorta in barca per questo viaggio, quindi dovrebbe essere abbastanza agevole poter installare un timone nuovo sullo scaffetto di destra.
The breakdown had cost time. Maserati was now only 340 miles ahead of the record, but at least they were underway once again. 2 weeks after leaving Hong Kong, they crossed the halfway stage as they passed the Cape of Good Hope. With a good breeze behind them, the trip north along the African coast was fast. The next hurdle was the notorious light winds of the doldrums. Conditions that allowed time to explain one of several Maserati recipes.
Eccoci qua nella nostra cucina vista mare. Allora, questa settimana facciamo la pasta con la bottarga.
Fantastico.
Allora, prima mossa è fare un soffrittino d'aglio.
Si pone la pasta.
Mettiamo la nostra pasta di mare.
Quella di mare.
Adesso un po' d'acqua dolce.
Carissimo l'olio. Olio.
2 minuti di fischio alla prima apertura per vedere come butta. Basta la bottarga Chez Maserati.
Del producto locale. Muchas gracias Giovanni. Oliver, muchas gracias.
Next, another milestone.
Stiamo per passare l'equatore e ci siamo. Emisfero nord.
Staying close to the African coast paid off. But as the team continued north, squalls and calm patches delivered the next obstacles. Their route then took them past the Canaries and onto the Portuguese coast, where conditions were starting to change.
Andiamo di Bolina, passato Finisterre. Questo sono i vestiti che ci mettiamo per timonare. Sono 25 nodi di vento. 25-30 nodi di vento, che vuol dire che sul ponte ce n'è almeno 40 e fa un bel freschetto.
Next was the home run up the English Channel. Now the pressure was really on. Strong headwinds, a difficult sea state and bitingly cold conditions made this the toughest leg of the trip. The risk of collision or capsize was high. They were now over 1,500 miles ahead of the record. As they turned west into the Thames estuary, victory was in sight. And at 1:20 in the afternoon, the new record was theirs, as Maserati passed under the Queen Elizabeth II Bridge.
Una bellissima avventura, un bellissimo viaggio, una bellissima navigazione, un bel equipaggio, la barca ottima, insomma tutto benissimo direi. Sono super contento, sicuramente bisogna che ringraziamo molto Nettuno, che è stato molto gentile, ci ha lasciato passare nei passaggi più difficili.
Now it was time to celebrate an impressive and courageous performance, completed in a quarter of the time of the great 1866 race, albeit without the team. Double America's Cup winning helmsman and skipper with Oracle Team USA, Jimmy Spithill has joined the Italian Cup team Luna Rossa for the next America's Cup. The move sees him return to the team that he was with for the 2007 America's Cup. As preparations continue for the next America's Cup in 2021 in Auckland, New Zealand, talk is of 6 potential challengers. In addition to Sir Ben Ainsley's BAR British team and a challenge from the New York Yacht Club, further challenges from Chinese and Australian teams, as well as second challenges from America and Italy, have been rumoured. Meanwhile, the class rules for the radical new 75-foot cup boat were due at the end of March. Their publication marks the start of the design and build process for the next cup cycle, although the new boats cannot be launched until the 31st of March 2019. This year, the Caribbean 600 race was all about numbers. Celebrating its 10th edition, the 600-mile offshore race attracted 84 boats to the start line. 850 sailors from 22 nations took part. 37 hours and 45 minutes after the start, a new course record had been set. 23 hours later, a second had been broken. But above all, the 2018 race will be best remembered for being tough. Just as the weather forecasters had predicted.
Trades are usually about 15 to 20 knots, now 20 to 25 knots. What is going to be the challenge for the teams? There is an upper level trough that provides unstable air, and that is going to be the driving mechanism for squalls.
Technical talk for windy, and everyone knew what that meant.
During the 3 days we're not going to be sleeping or anything.
Strong winds will favor the bigger boats. Records are going to be beaten for sure.
We'll be pushing hard. It'll be fun to break a record.
But without breaking the boat. For many, this was easier said than done. More boats retired than completed the course. The start had been wet and punchy, with big seas making life hard on the opening leg. But once around the first mark, the fleet accelerated downwind, and the high-performance machines were off. Leading the charge were 2 very different boats. Paradox, a 63-foot trimaran, and Rambler, the 88-foot-long monohull. Both had a common goal: to be the first around the course.
Started on a positive note when we caught Rambler on our way to Barbuda. In these winds, we were significantly faster on a reach. The wave state was really big, and we were going very fast. The ride down from Tentemara down to Guadeloupe was at night, and very fast, very intense, very wet.
I was trying to shield myself from the spray every possible way because it was coming from everywhere, and I just couldn't see anymore. And in the end, I was just shutting my eyes for as long as I could, and just trying to focus enough on the instruments just to go, yeah, it's about right.
Helming by feel Aschenbrenner's team kept their foot to the floor to cross the finish 36 minutes ahead of Rambler. Although the private battle had been won, Rambler's crew had set a new monohull record, breaking the previous fastest time for the course by almost 3 hours.
This time we did not leave much on the track. You always leave a few minutes here and there and things happen, and like we were behind Redonda for a little longer than I might have expected.
The record David's crew had broken was one they'd set aboard his previous larger boat, Rambler 100. So how had they achieved it?
It took 1.5 tons of displacement out of the boat, so it's lighter and livelier, and it just gets going. It gets up and goes very quickly. Everybody notices that when you drive the boat.
But David also knows the risks.
I mean, you always just wait for that sudden bang. It signals trouble, because we've all had those bangs, and they can be of greater and lesser severity. So you worry about that more than anything else, and making sure nobody gets injured.
The next record came from Catherine Poor and her crew, who'd set a new record in the class 40s. Others had excelled too. For big boats with a long stride, the boisterous conditions were perfect for letting the beasts off the leash.
On the backside of all the islands leading up to go around St. Bart's and St. Martin, we had the Fro on doing 30 knots on the backside of the islands there, and that was when we really left produce behind.
But elsewhere, the conditions were taking their toll on the fleet. The first major casualty was a capsize.
We started getting big lifting puffs over 30 knots, and one of them just caught us off guard. We didn't react quickly enough, and the boat went over.
Fortunately, all the crew were safe and rescued. For others, gear failure forced their hands.
The wind slowly started to build, so a call for a takedown. Just at that moment, we actually were doing 18 knots, dug the nose, and at the same moment, a 35-knot squall came through in a slightly different, it just knocked us flat. We needed to just pack it in and bring her home. She was not in a good state.
About 60 or 70 miles in, we snapped our canard, which is our only real means of going upwind, as we're a canting keel boat. So it just wasn't feasible to go on. I think jumping off a wave, we came down a little bit sidewards, and the force was enough to snap the canard. You know, sometimes you run out of luck.
For some, electronics were the issue.
The problem is electronics and seawater don't go that well together, and it's a struggle. Maybe I reset my computer 80 times, maybe I reset my wireless system 35 times, I don't know. But it's a battle.
Had a great time in the early parts of the race, that's for sure. Within a few hours of the race, electronics all went down, so we were basically sailing blind and with no electronics. You know, the biggest concern was safety.
The 2018 Caribbean 600 had been a brutal affair. Just 41 boats had completed the course, but those that had took a positive view.
If you're going to be wet, it might as well be warm.
Coming up next, why now is the time to go foiling. Plus,
at one stage a few hours ago I thought it was going to be tears before bedtime.
New levels of stress in the Volvo. Welcome back. Still to come, extreme sailing in Muscat and extreme stress in Auckland. But first, once the preserve of professionals, now anyone can fly. On top of a hill in North London, there was a buzz. It was showtime at Alexandra Palace, as the world's biggest dinghy exhibition opened its doors. From Olympic heroes to weekend warriors, from classic to carbon, the annual showcase for the dinghy racing world drew the crowds once again. But this year, there was a new call to action: come foiling. Until recently, hydrofoiling was for those with nerve and an excess of talent. Frequently drawn to the international moth, the world's best have made flying look easy. But for most, it isn't. Yet that hasn't dimmed the appeal.
I've just done a talk here at the Dinghy Show. I asked how many of you have foiled. 3 people put their hands up. I asked how many people want to have a go. The whole room put their hands up.
Hillman runs Pro Vela, a sailing school in Spain teaching foiling to everyday sailors. Now he and his business partners have gone a stage further and produced a new foiling boat, the F101.
We developed the F101 based on the fact we wanted people to learn to foil quickly. You can coach somebody on it if they're struggling. It's very, very difficult to capsize, but not impossible. So you can make errors and then you reset. So the hull is an elongated moth hull. You can get the foils further apart, which gives it a much more stable foiling platform. It's got wings, the same as a moth. So you can launch this and you can sail it out without capsizing. We use exactly the same system as the moth, which is the T-foil with a mechanical flap on the back of it. Once it's running and your boat's foiling, it's all automatic, and the sailor can focus on sailing rather than worrying about the foils. So as long as you set this up correctly, it will self-adjust and really take good care of you.
The F101 is just one of several new designs that are aimed at making foiling simpler. Another is the Wasp.
In principle, it is very similar to the Moth. Key differences are, it's one design. The boat was actually the brainchild of Andrew McDougall, who felt that there was a place in the market for a Moth that was more user-friendly for your average club sailor. It's got airbags on the underside of the tramp here, which allows you, if you simple terms, you've got stabilizers almost. There is an option to lower the angle of the wings to make them a bit more horizontal, so again, making the boat more stable. It's designed so it's got retractable foils. So if we cast over towards the rudder there, it's half up to demonstrate that, and the main foil retracts up into the hull, so launch and recovery is like a conventional boat.
But you don't even have to buy a boat to go foiling. A retrofit foiling kit is available for the popular Laser and RS Aero. Simply plug in the new daggerboard and rudder, and you're ready to fly. Whichever you choose, the message is clear. Foiling is taking off. Strong winds and a fiercely competitive fleet saw the racing get off to a lively start in Muscat for the opening event of the 2018 Extreme Sailing Series. As if picking up where they'd left off last season, Dinghy, along with 2017 overall winners SAP Extreme Sailing Team and third-placed Oman Air, were quick to push their way to the front of the field. By the end of day one, the trio were top of the points board, with Dinghy taking the lead. Day two saw the fleet reshuffled, with Oman Air and Land Rover BAR taking wins. The final day of racing saw SAP raise the stakes in a last-minute charge as Rasmus Kostner's team closed the points gap on Dinghy. A win in the final race of the series was all that was needed to take overall victory in Act 1. Yet the head-to-head battle was over before it had started, as SAP made an error in their timing to the start. All Dinghy had to do now was to keep their nose clean and the boat up the right way for the final lap of Act 1. They succeeded in both to take the overall win.
We are passionate and we try to stick just behind SAP, and on the last race we just beat them, and that was all we need to do.
Leaving SAP in second and Oman Sail third. Think stress, and you might think 40 knots, big waves, and the Southern Ocean. But not on this leg. Instead, the real stress came in the last 100 miles to Auckland. The Volvo Ocean Race fleet had sailed 27,000 miles of the round-the-world course. But the last two legs saw big changes in fortunes. Some very close racing and plenty of stress, especially at the front of the fleet.
It's been a pretty tough day. We were leading and then they were leading and then we were leading and then they were leading and then we were leading.
It was little different at the back, as Mapfre and Dongfeng were locked in a 6,000-mile duel. While in the middle, Brunel took a big gamble that went sour, leaving Akzo Nobel, scallywag, and Turn the Tide on Plastic to lead the charge to the leg finish, where an Auckland upset was in store.
It's going to be a challenge to get in good shape to the north of New Zealand, and then the last 200 miles in look very light.
As the fleet closed in, his predictions came good and the racing got unbearably close. Akzo Nobel and Song Hung Kai Scallywag continued their private battle.
I think we'd be more than happy to take a second and run away and hide because it's been a horrific leg, this one.
It's all pretty close after 21 days at sea.
But in the Franco-Spanish duel, the French skipper was confused.
Fighting together again since day one. I don't know who is the mouse, who is the cat.
And in the middle, D. Cafaris' Turn the Tide on Plastic was being squeezed as they defended their third place, and the pressure was showing.
At one stage a few hours ago I thought it was going to be cheers before bedtime, but the nightmare is over my shoulder where we've got Dongfeng and Mapfre now breathing down our necks. From being 120 miles behind, they've just caught up, the weather's played to their advantage. You know, for me, it's all about getting the result we deserve, and if it goes the wrong way, I'll be absolutely gutted.
Words that would haunt her later. As the breeze filled in, the story became one of heroes and heartbreak by the finish. Akzo Nobel took the win.
Even this morning, you know, we had a couple of lead changes. Unbelievable crew work. I'm unbelievable proud of the crew, and they did such a fantastic job, and we managed to be 1.5 mile in front and finish the leg.
By just 12 minutes over Scallywag.
Hats off to Akzo Nobel. They sailed really, really well. We put out much pressure as we could on for 3 weeks, and they stood strong.
The crushing blow came in the last few miles as Mapfre and Dongfeng forced their way through to push Cafaris' team into 5th. The crew on the blue boat were distraught, their skipper struggling to find the right words.
We're pretty gutted, and you can tell by the fact that nobody stood along the deck. I don't actually even know what to say. Gutted. We had a good race. We thought we were going to have a better result, but those pesky red boats always seem to get it their way.
While clearly relieved at coming 4th, Caudrelier felt their pain.
Sorry for Turn the Tide because they did a fantastic race and I think they deserve the 3rd place, but that's sailing.
There was more stress to come as light winds saw a drifting match for the import racing. The tension built once more the following week as teams headed off on the longest and most intimidating leg of the race, back into the Southern Ocean and around Cape Horn. Join us to find out what happened at the bottom of the world as the World Sailing Show heads to Brazil.